Hello everyone, I'm Casper. I'm the founder of Testeroni, where we help our clients make sure that they deliver their software fully cooked instead of half-baked. And here on YouTube, we help the aspiring QA engineers become test automation engineers, one slice at a time. And today we are going to be talking about a concept that you will come across very often and which I feel is pretty much misunderstood within the community of beginning test automation engineers and also by some organizations. And that concept is the pass rate. So let's jump to our whiteboard. So today we are going to be talking about the pass rate. And so this may seem like something easy, right? Because if you are a good tester, you are creating tests which are green, right? Which are passing, because you are creating tests which are functional, which actually work. So why shouldn't they be green? Why shouldn't they just be functioning properly, right? Because if the tests are not functioning properly, then surely you as a tester did something wrong. And sadly, this is something that I hear quite a bit from the beginners. And also, like I said, this is also a policy that some of the organizations actually implement, that the pass rate is a reflection of how good the QA team is. But actually, this is getting the whole thing backwards. And today we are going to explore just that. So let's start with a definition. What exactly is a pass rate? So basically, the pass rate is the ratio of the tests which passed to all the tests which were run in the specific instance. So this is the number of tests which passed divided by all the tests. And by all the tests, we mean all the tests within the whole suite minus the skipped tests. Because of course the skipped tests, and they will be an important part that we will talk about later. So the skipped tests are just the tests that we have marked as not in need of being run in a given run. So these are, for example, things which have a bug attached to them. So they shouldn't be run in a specific instance. So this is all the tests minus skipped tests. And as you can see, also this is times 100%, of course, because this is shown as a percentage value. So as you can see, the higher the number of passed tests, the higher the pass rate. That's basically it. So you can also hear terms like pass ratio or passing percentage, stuff like that. But the pass rate is like the typical term for that. But all of these mean the same thing. So when the number of tests which pass goes up, then of course the pass ratio also goes up. So as you can see, the two methods of the pass ratio getting higher is either to have more tests which passed in the same set of all the tests, or have less tests in general. But as you can see, the lowering of the denominator is not really a feasible way of thinking about that, because it's not a good idea to just randomly be throwing tests out of your framework just because they don't work. So of course, it's not really great. You can also see that adding more skipped tests could, if you have the homeostasis of the rest of the equation, then upping the number of skipped tests would also cause the pass rate to go up, but that is also not really something I recommend, to just go skipping tests just because they are red. So the only reasonable solution to having the pass ratio go up is to have the number of passing tests go up. And so it is easy to get tangled up in the notion that you should strive for as high of a pass rate as possible, because you are responsible for creating the tests. And if the tests are not green, that means something is wrong with the tests themselves, right? Because you probably made a mistake, or that there is a problem somewhere within your framework that causes it all to not really work as it should. So you may think about the problems with the pass rate as the problems with your framework, or you as a sub-team, the QA sub-team. But that's not really the case in some situations, of course. So first, let's get the situations in which it is your problem out of the way. So when the low pass ratio is your problem. And so this actually comes in two flavors, because first of all, maybe let's even rephrase the question a bit, because this will also get a little tricky, because it's not only that a low pass rate is your problem. A too high of a pass rate, an artificially high pass rate, is as much of your problem as a too low of a pass rate is. So let's not think about a low, let's just say high or low pass rate your problem. So like I said, it comes in two flavors. So first of all, it can be artificially too low. So it can be, and this may happen, for example, when your script is not keeping up with the changes in the application. Like it's not really utilizing the right elements within the UI. The locators are bad. There are some changes in the API which you are not taking into account. There are some problems within your framework which cause weird timeouts, for example, or which don't really correspond with the application itself. So there's quite a bit of things that may cause the tests to fail, and it is your problem, and it is also you are the one to blame, because you may have just not really taken into account the elements of the UI, for example, which have changed, or you have not updated your objects within the your page object model to actually reflect the way the application is working. And in such situations, of course, the problem of the too low of a pass rate is your problem, because it is artificially too low. And the keyword here is artificially. Whenever the pass rate does not reflect reality in an artificial way, it is your problem. It certainly is a problem when you have not really taken care of the changes within the application, for example, or if you are not presented with enough of documentation, because this may also be that the tests are not functioning properly. They are not utilizing the right methods or the right elements, and it is not really your problem in the sense that you have created. It may be that you were not given enough information, and you will come across a lot of situations when the documentation is not really that good, or it is lacking completely. And in such a situation, the PR is too low, and you need to do something in order for the test to actually be able to test what they should be testing, because in such a situation, they are not really even testing the thing that they should. So in such a situation, of course, it's a problem that you should try to fix. So this is not keeping up with the docs, or not keeping up with the changes, stuff like that, some external stuff that is influencing your internal workings of the framework. And the other thing is also the artificially too high of a pass ratio. So this may be in situations where you are not really being strict enough with your conditions for the passing of a test. So for example, you are leaving too much leeway in terms of which results are deemed correct. And this may be both in the numerical sense and in the more abstract sense. For example, you are allowing for too much of a wait time, and this results in so much waiting that even though for the automation it seems like it's working, for an actual human interacting with your application, it may be unacceptable to actually wait so long. So it may be artificially too high, and that it's not really a reason to to party and to have a great deal of happiness over it, because it is high, but it's artificially high. So this is just as much of a problem as artificially too low. And like we said, the artificially too high usually may come to something like being too forgiving with the conditions. So as you can see, both of these are a problem, and you can see a common theme emerging from these. So basically, the problem, you may see right now, is the word artificially. And why that is? So the reason for that is that the pass rate should show you how well the application is functioning, or how well the product is functioning when compared to the ideal version that is documented or that should be the end goal. So whichever artificial discrepancy you get, regardless of whether it goes up or down artificially, it is a problem, and it is something that needs to be addressed. And this should be addressed by the QA team. And then, of course, the pass rate is your problem, and you should do something, either gather more information or up your game with creating the tests to get rid of as much of the artificial problems as it is possible. Of course, they will sometimes emerge because you may sometimes just not keep up with the changes fast enough, and it's not really anyone's fault because it's reasonable that it takes some time. So as always, it comes down to communication within the team and keep letting everyone know why it may not be working properly or why the test may not really be that functional for some time because there were like a lot of changes which you didn't have time to account for. But this is all about the artificial aspect. So this is when is a high or low PR your problem. But the more important thing, I think, that I wanted to cover in this video, because this is pretty obvious, right? If you get some experience, it will be second nature to you which of pass rate problems are your problem and which are not. But since you are a beginner, I think a more important mindset shift comes in the form of when the pass rate is not your problem. So when we have that out of the way, we should think about what actually is your job as a tester. So the big realization that I would like you to get out of this video is that as a tester, regardless of whether you're being a manual tester or a test automation engineer, is always to be sure to provide as much value regarding quality assurance to the product as is possible. And to put it more briefly, you as a tester are creating a machinery, in this case, a testing framework, which should be a well-oiled machinery that actually finds problems within the product. And so when it does find problems, it finds them in the form of a failing test. And so the failing test is not the problem itself when everything is written well, and it's not one of the things that we're talking about a moment before. The problem is a problem within the application. And you, as a test automation engineer, your job is to create a sort of a litmus test for the product that tells the whole team or the whole organization, and first of all tells you when to inform that something is wrong. You are the whistleblower for the problems within the product. You are not there to assure that the report looks pretty. And I've actually come across organizations which function in such a way. They expect the testers to create tests in such a way that the reports look good. But it's not your job. Your job is to create a framework that detects problems. So the big thing that you should remember is that your framework is a litmus test for how well the application is running. It is unwise at best and reckless at worst to assume that your framework and the pass rate that it shows is representative of the quality of the QA team or of you or of your work. It is not indicative of how well you are performing your tasks. And actually, I would argue that if there's not a problem within the creation of the tests, like we talked before, that the more sensitive the framework is to the problems within the application, the better it is. So it's not your goal to have everything be green and pretty. Your goal is to create something that is sensitive enough to tell the rest of the team that something is not really functioning properly. And of course, you also need to find a balance. That is why experience is so important in the QA world, because you very often need to work with various constrictions from different sides. So it shouldn't be too sensitive, because you still need to have some leeway for how it's functioning and to take into account, for example, the environment that it is run on. Because it may very well be that the like dev environment which you will be testing on is going to need to accept longer wait times than, for example, the production one. But also you don't want to go too much in the other direction, because then you have the problem which we talked before, that you are leaving too much leeway and actually you are not testing the thing that you should be testing. You are just creating tests for the sake of them being created, upping the total number of tests and upping your pass rate. But that's not really the case. That's not how it should work. And so you may think, yeah, but if half of the tests that I've created are read all the time, it looks like I'm doing bad of a job. And I've heard such things from people who are new to the field, and I've also heard such things from people who were tangled up with toxic organizations. I can't really help you too much with the latter, but as for the former, you should think about the story that the pass rate and that the report tells you. And the story that it tells is the story of how well the application is functioning. And as for the problem with, yeah, but I'm getting read everywhere, that's where the skipping is important. That's why, remember, at the beginning of this talk, we have, let's underline it, we've talked about the skipped test. That's, I wanted to put the skipped tests within the equation here, rather than just saying divided by all the tests, because the skipped tests are an important part of it. So there's a reason there's a functionality of skipping tests in all modern frameworks. And the reason is, usually it goes in such a way, it also depends on the policies of your organizations, of course, so you may need to check with them. But if not, I'll suggest to actually propose it, that when you find a problem, when the test finds a problem, and you know that something is not functioning properly, you don't just leave it hanging there as a failing test for the rest of eternity before someone from the desk decides to actually fix it. You actually mark it as a skipped test and just attach a bug to the reason for the skipping. And many frameworks have a very good way of handling this, like Robot Framework, for example, has the whole functionality around the skipping, and it'll actually show you how many of the tests were passed and skipped and failed, and you can actually filter by the ones which were skipped, and it gives you the reason for skipping, and you could provide a reason for skipping. So that all works very well, and actually you should skip the tests which are consistently given fail states or which can't be fixed too fast. Not because you want to have your PR look good, but because then they obfuscate the whole view. Because if it is known that something is a problem and it is already, the team already knows, you have already talked about it, you have retested it manually, for example. It also depends on the situation, of course, but I'm giving like a very bird's eye view over that. If everyone is informed and stuff like that, there's no real reason to have it sit in your testing framework and take execution time and show a lower pass ratio than it is really in such a situation, just because some known bug is still valid. Everyone knows it's still valid. And the goal, once again, of your framework is to be a litmus test for how well the application is running. And so the pass rate is just one of the mechanisms that allows for that. So if the results from the pass rate are being obfuscated by a lot of old failing test cases, then it is not really functioning properly. So even though it is telling the story of the functioning of the whole application, it is not really functioning properly as a litmus test anymore, because it makes it harder for you to see in the report that something is amiss. If there's suddenly a lower pass ratio, it may be harder to notice that it took another hit, like by 1, 2, or 3 percentage points, than it would be if you just skipped all the tests which are already reported and which are already being taken care of, or which you know won't be taken care of for some time, and then you had a 1 or 2 percentage hit. Then you would probably see it. But if it's already low, it's easier to miss it. So once again, always focus on structuring your tests in such a way that it is easy for you, as you are the caretaker of that, to see the problem, to identify it, and to be able to report it. So that's the goal. A high pass ratio, low pass ratio, and stuff like that, it's all just a way of letting you know. So the pass rate in and of itself is not a goal. It is not a goal either up or down. It is not a goal in staying the same. The goal of it is to be informative. And whatever prevents it from being informative, be it your mistakes, be it not being updated, be it not having enough documentation or knowledge from the team, be it you leaving too much leeway in the test and thus allowing conditions which are a little too forgiving, or be it the results being obfuscated by a lot of failing tests which are already taken care of and which you can't really do anything more about. In all such situations, the framework is no longer functioning properly as a litmus test. So you should focus on it being informative, and in utilizing methods of working with it, like skipping, in such a way that it is informative for you, because then you can be informative for the rest of the team, and then the product will benefit from it. And this is the overarching goal of creating a testing framework. A low pass ratio is not a proof of your incompetence. And if you're at an organization which thinks like that, which wants pretty reports, then I would recommend getting your resume back in order and starting to send it around, because it is not a good way to live. You should not really focus on the pass rate as if it was a holy grail of testing, because it is not. It is just one of the methods of letting you know that the quality is in one state or the other state. So this is basically what it is. So once again, I really want you to remember that low pass ratio is not equal to incompetence. It is indicative of problems, but not necessarily problems on the QA side, and not necessarily problems on the product side. It may be one or the other. There is some problems if the pass rate suddenly takes a hit, but it is not such a one-to-one relation. And just think of it, blaming the test automation engineer for a low pass rate is like blaming the body thermometer for telling you that you have a fever. It's not the thermometer's fault, right? You have a fever, it's just letting you know. So this is its job. Your framework is the thermometer. If you manufacture it wrong, it may give false positives, false negatives, just like the thermometer could if they messed something up with the sensors, for example, or if they just created some cheap junk and just sold it around, then of course it may not really be indicative of the actual state of your body temperature. But if the thermometer is right, if your framework is right, if it's created in a good way, if it's created with proper tools, if it takes into account all the things that are happening within the application, then the problem is not the thermometer. So getting mad at the thermometer for the reason that it's telling you that you have a fever is a little silly, and just as silly as blaming the QA team for allowing a low pass rate or for creating a framework which consistently gives low readings. If there's a problem with the framework, the thermometer, then of course you are to blame. But if it's not, then it is not your problem. That it's your success that you have actually found the problems and that you are actually able to tell the others that the problems are there, but it is not your problem that the problems have been found. You are just creating the thermometer. There's a reason, there's a saying that you should not shoot the messenger, and it's been there since ancient times, and the reason for that is the messenger is not the one to blame, and in the same way here, you are not to blame, and your framework is not to blame. Your framework is actually to praise. But the problem which actually causes many of these things that we are talking about, like the weird organization policies when they try to prioritize pretty reports and high pass rates over actually functioning frameworks, is that it is harder and requires more experience and it requires more knowledge to actually evaluate whether a framework is created well than it is to evaluate the pass rate. Like the pass rate is just a number, so you can see that suddenly it's not like 90, it is something like, I don't know, 60, and then it is obvious. You can just go there and see, okay, it's low, so something must be bad. But it's not so easy to get into the whole code base of the framework and to evaluate all the scripts and to evaluate all the decisions that were made within the tech stack. And so it is not that easily seen, and it is not that easy to be evaluated by someone that is not deep within the field. So it is easier to blame people for having too low of a pass rate than it is to blame them for not creating the underlying thermometer in a good way. And so this creates such weird situations that we have talked about. But once again, this is not really a good idea because this is not really taking into account what pass rate actually is. And pass rate is just another tool. It's the same, it's as much of a tool as a pass or fail verdict is when a manual tester is clicking through something, trying to check whether it works properly or not. That once again, then you wouldn't blame the tester for the functionality not working. So in the same situation, you would not blame the framework here, and you would not blame the creator of that framework or a test automation engineer that is actually working with the framework and working with keeping it up to date. And so I think we're ready to jump into the summary. So first of all, you should try to create good tests, not evergreen ones. And so this is something that we were circling around for the whole presentation here, that your goal, you are not creating a coloring book. It is not your goal to have everything be pretty and green. Your goal is to create good tests, and good tests are ones which are informative, which help you and the team provide as much quality as possible to the application, and which allow you to find the problems early and find them repetitively and find them reliably, and to be able to actually even find them in the first place. So this is the point number 2. The goal is to be able to reliably find problems, not to artificially control the numbers. So this is the extension of the previous point that we have also talked about, that whenever something is happening to the pass rate and it is happening artificially, something is wrong. And then it is your job to actually fix it, or to be able to skip it for the time being until you are given a good set of information. But in general, you should be able to create a framework that is able to reliably find problems. And if it is finding a lot of them, so be it. If it is finding them often, so be it. It is just indicative of the fever that is underlying. It is not indicative of your incompetence. It is actually the success of you and your framework if it is able to actually find problems easily, reliably, and to be able to locate them early. It's not a problem, it's a success. And so the final one is that your goal is a well-functioning product and not a pretty report. Remember, in testing, there is no bonus points for style. You can't really add some sprinkles on top of your work to get bonus points from the judges, because there are no judges. So your goal is a well-functioning product, and the way to do that is a well-functioning framework which is able to find problems. And this is the only way. All the other stuff is just fluff added over the years by all the organizations and fields around that helps you, like the pass rate, but it is not the goal in and of itself. The goal in and of itself is to have a well-functioning product, and the only way to actually achieve that is to have a good framework. And if it's consistently giving low readings, then it tells way much more about the problems within the organization, or the problems within the team, or the problems within the product, within the documentation, than it does about the problems with the QA side. And with that, I leave you here. Thank you very much for your attention. Once again, I urge you to not really take personally low readings of a pass rate, because it is not your problem. And if you take the needed care to actually create a good framework, then all the other problems are just readings that are problems of someone else. That's basically being a tester in a nutshell, as you probably know already. But yeah, you shouldn't take that personally, because it is not indicative of your incompetence. It is indicative of some problems within the application. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope that you have learned some new stuff here today. If you have any problems, questions, suggestions, just feel free to ask away. Leave it in the comments, and I hope to see you around for the next episode of Testeroni. Thank you very much, and keep on rocking.